It's time for episode 24, and it's me, Chucky, from the forums here, along with Jigsaw.
What's up, my homeboys? I'm sorry.
Another stellar lineup of movies today. In fact, I think you're killing me a little bit with some of these. I'm dying a slow death.
Okay, none of these movies is worse than Vampire. Can we at least agree on that?
Worse than Vampire?
The this movie that we watched.
Well, I don't...
I guess we'll find out.
You're right, but that's not really a movie that I can use because I just don't like the old black and white movie, silent movies. So that was a silent movie, right?
Technically no, but that's okay.
Anyways, 5 movies this week. We've got The Evil from 1978, a haunted house type movie. Then we move on to someone who, well, they wouldn't watch that movie because they see no evil.
Yes.
Yes. So we've got See No Evil from 2006, slasher movie. Then we move on to Lost Souls from 1998, which is, I guess, another haunted house type thing. I can't remember the plot anymore.
That's not encouraging.
Yeah. No. Then, obviously, the best movie of the night, we've got RoboCop from 1987. We all know what that's about. And then we finish things off with an 80s horror movie that I'm sure some people enjoy, The Stuff from 1985.
We start off with, as Chucky said, The Evil from 1978. And it's pretty simple plot. This doctor buys sort of a dilapidated mansion, and he's going to use it for like a drug rehab type facility. So he invites some friends over so they can clean it out. But some supernatural things start happening, and oh my god, it might be haunted. So that is The Evil. It's it's a movie I wish I liked more than I do. I like the idea behind it, but I don't think the final product is really that great. But before I get into it, what were your genre thoughts on this one?
Well, I first watched the trailer for it before I watched the movie, and the trailer actually had me thinking this was going to be a fairly decent movie. It looked like it had some potential. And then I watched it. In fact, I tried to watch this like 3 or 4 times, and every single time it failed to hold my interest. I'd watch the whole thing, but eventually as time goes by, I'd start looking down at my laptop and,
It's a very, very tedious movie.
I mean, there's things that happen in the movie, but there's these long periods of just these characters which I don't really care for. They're just all having conversations back and forth. One guy thinks there's a scientific reason for all the shit that's happening, and then, she's trying to convince him it's something else, and there's one moment in the movie where a dude's doing this hanging prank. I mean, that was kind of amusing, but that's all I can really highlight from the movie.
Yeah, I think, so I've seen this movie once before, many years ago, and the only thing I remembered about this movie was the sablade scene, which I still think is probably one of the few standout sequences in the movie. It's just a very short thing where this guy gets his hand cut by a sablade, but aside from that, there's not that much going for this.
I mean, there's things happening. There's people getting electrocuted and burnt to death, and we've got this dog going crazy at the start, and some woman looks like she's about to get raped by a ghost, and there's things happening, but it's still, even though there's all these things happening, it still felt like a bit of a dull movie. I don't know, it just bored me. I couldn't get into it at all.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because Like in the 60s, there was some pretty decent, like, haunted house type movies. Obviously from 1963, there's The Haunting, which even that movie has, like, it feels dry at times, but this one, it feels like it could be so much more than what it is. And it has, like, okay reviews, but I can't imagine there's that many people who watch this and think, hey, they nailed it. That's what a 70s haunted house movie should be. I mean, like, if you're just picking a random movie to watch, it might be okay, but it's really not that much here that I would recommend. I mean, I sort of like the ending. It's a bit like over the top, cheesy, corny, but it's probably it's at least okay. It picks up a bit at the end, but getting there, I think, is a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, to be honest, I have nothing else.
If the yes, it's a movie, so.
It is a movie, yes. It looks like it has a half decent production. I mean, it's not like they didn't really have the resources to make a somewhat decent movie. So
Yeah, I know that's what's somewhat disappointing because I actually think the setting, the mansion, I think it looks pretty decent. If they just had a better story or maybe but yeah, some okay pacing, the movie might have been a bit more worth watching. I don't remember exactly what I thought about this one when I first saw it, but I can't imagine I was much enthralled with it. So I just there's not much in this movie I would imagine it's worth recommending. Just it has some okay actors like Richard Crenna is somewhat big name. Worth noting he was also in Death Ship, which was also a really dry, tedious movie. So it's fun.
it might be a bit of a pattern there.
Yeah, so yeah, like Chucky is pretty much correct. There's just a lot of talking in this movie, and there's some action, but not much of the action is really all that notable. It's like a few suspenseful scenes. One where this guy's trying to climb out of a window and escape the haunted house. It's a decent scene, but it lacks a punch or something. It's not much here, so I'm just going to throw this movie a 5.5, and I'll probably round that down to a 5 out of 10. I wish I could like it more, but I just can't.
Mm. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10 all up in this bitch. Yeah, those electrocution scenes, they were quality. Just yeah, some of they had some good effects, not so great effects, and yeah, like I said, it just failed to hold my interest, and I don't need to see this again. I've watched it like 3 times in 1 week, technically.
Fourth time's a charm.
It's not getting to a fourth time. I'm
I,
done
I
with
mean,
this one.
I guess I do have to point out there is a Victor Buono in the movie, and if you're familiar with the 1960s Batman series, he was the guy who played King Tut, and he's also been in some other classic horror movies, such as Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and The Strangler from '64. So his scene is sort of worth seeing, but don't go into the movie hoping that he's the main star because he doesn't really appear until like the last 15 minutes.
Let's move on to See No Evil from 2006. Pretty simple movie here, as are most slasher movies. A group of delinquents are sent to clean an old hotel as some sort of prison release type program thing. I mean, they're not. Were they in prison? I'm not sure.
It's like a jail type thing to get their sentences reduced.
Yeah.
Just such a stupid idea.
But yeah, they go to this hotel, and there's this big maniac still lurking inside, and eventually they all get hunted down by him. That's pretty much it. There's a bit of a plot here, a bit of a backstory to the actual maniac character, which I don't think I need to go too much into, but it's an okay movie. I don't think it's a bad movie, not necessarily a great movie either. It opens up with a pretty decent scene, I thought. You get to see this girl with her eyes cut out, and bit of a shootout with the main bad guy, who, I mean, we all know it's the bad guy's played by Kane, a wrestler. Or I'm hoping Jigsaw knew that.
Yeah, I don't watch wrestling, so I'm assuming he was a big wrestler back in the day.
Yeah, he, I mean, I used to watch wrestling from, I'd say around 1997 to maybe the early 2000s. I kind of stopped watching after that. It just became a little too, I mean, it was always silly, but it was entertaining, and then it kind of just got more and more silly as it moved on. But Kane was a wrestler that got introduced, I think it was either 97 or 98, somewhere around where I started watching. Like, he came onto the scene just after I started watching. And you'd probably enjoy his character if you did watch wrestling, because he does have more of a horror-themed type character. But anyways, I believe that WWE, they actually made a whole lot of movies around this time, kind of the mid-2000s, late 2000s, and they filmed a lot of them, or quite a few of them, in Australia, actually not too far from where I live. And this one was actually filmed not too far from where I live. I don't know, it's kind of interesting to considering, I live in a completely other country, but what did you think of this one?
So just to give a little backstory, I have seen this movie only once before, and much like The Evil, it's been years. I had to be like a young teenager when I first saw this movie. So I was sort of interested in seeing it again because it's been so long. I was I wasn't really surprised, but I was somewhat disappointed. I mean, the kills themselves are decent. My main issue, and hopefully I can try to describe this correctly, some of the editing in the movie, the cuts in the movie, like the going between scenes, like, in hyper speed, it just really bothered the hell out of me. It's like watching some Marilyn Manson music video or something. If they had just, I think there's a scene where this guy's either trying to like light the cigarette or he's trying to do something simple and they go to three different cuts and like just show the scene. And that happened like throughout the movie, just like a stylistic thing that I really hate, and this movie's just full of it. And another thing I need to mention without spoiling anything, there's a scene toward the end in which a character is falling out of a window, and it has to be one of the worst scenes I've seen in like the last 15 years of my life. Such a like the whole 30-second sequence was just terrible, terrible stuff. Just my opinion.
Yeah, it's certainly got a few different parts of the movie that are kind of stupid or could have been a lot better, but yeah, it's a pretty generic slasher movie for me. Not a whole lot special about it, but I also didn't think it was all that bad either.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily terrible. I just don't think it has enough in it to like really get what I'm looking for out of a slasher movie.
Hmm.
Although I will say, now it took me about 30 minutes into the movie to realize this, but there is an actress in the movie who I have seen like in more modern day times. The chick who plays Zoe, Rachel Taylor. She is in the Marvel show Jessica Jones, which is a show that I personally enjoy. So it's just sort of fun seeing her like 10 years older playing this really bitchy, shoplifting chick.
Yeah, I don't know the show, so I have no comment.
That's okay. One thing I do give this movie credit for, it does show the dangers of extremist religious beliefs. I mean, the guy that Kane plays, it's a guy named Jacob. I mean, we've seen like little flashbacks, but he has like a pretty terrible childhood. Um, I felt sort of bad for the guy to be honest. So it's interesting. It doesn't really focus that much on this, but the whole reason he's killing people is because it's sort of ingrained in him. Hey, these people are sinners, and you have to look in their eyes and see the sin, and hey, you might as well take out the eyes too.
Now, actually, I thought you probably would have been. Well, I know you're into politics and everything, but I know that Kane, like his real name is Glenn Jacobs, and isn't he like the mayor of some place in America?
God, is he? I mean, That might be true. I'm just going to look this up now. My political interests are more like national and not local.
Yeah, it's more of a local type thing, but I don't know. It's just kind of amusing, this big dude who was well, we've seen other wrestlers become politicians before, like Jesse Ventura is the first one that kind of pops to mind, but I'm sure there's others.
He's a mayor of a county? How can... Okay, it's a...
Knox County, I think.
Indeed,
Yeah.
in Tennessee. I didn't think counties had mayors, but that's okay. That might be a Tennessee thing.
I don't know, it's just, yeah, you're into politics and stuff, and even though this is more of a smaller thing, probably doesn't really do much for you, but yeah.
Although Tennessee is closer to Indiana than I would like, so... Of course, to be fair, Indiana's closer to Indiana than I would like, so... Actually, there's one more thing I want to say. About the KOs, most of them are done with like this hook and chain type thing, which is unique. I don't think I've seen that many times. It doesn't always look great, but I will say if the movie does one thing right, it's the satin or the sort of dilapidated hotel type thing, and I think the kills are pretty good. So even though there's some big issues with this movie, if you're just going in for like sort of a mindless slasher movie, you still might have an okay time. I mean, it's not like we said, it's not horrible. It's not great. There's quite a few bad slasher movies from that time period.
Yeah, the location is pretty good, and that's I don't know if you've seen the sequel, but
No.
I mean the sequel's kind of more or less the same, but instead it takes place in a morgue because he's believed to be dead after this movie, and then
I did see that. Was it Catherine Isabel in the sequel?
there's actually quite a few popular people. Catherine Isabel's in it. Danielle Harris is like the lead actress in it. There's one other guy, I think. Anyways, those are the two main ones that I'm familiar with. Of course, we all know Danielle Harris from the Halloween movies and other things that she's been in. So it's got maybe a better cast, but I thought the location of the mansion was a little more enjoyable. Anyways, we can discuss that movie at some point later on if we ever get to that one. So for this movie, I think it's okay. It's got some okay kills. I think Kane is quite menacing just based on his appearance, like just this huge guy, way bigger than his victims. The backstory to his character, it's okay. It didn't really do a whole lot to affect my enjoyment of the movie. I'll throw it a 6 out of 10. At one point, I considered maybe even a 7, but I just can't go that far. I'm gonna give it a 6.
Yeah. So I actually, when I was watching it, I was having a somewhat not great time. But now that I've had like an hour and a half to sort of reflect on it, I still found it more enjoyable than I found it unenjoyable, if that makes sense. So I'm going to throw this one a 5.5. I'm going to round it up to a 6. So yeah, it is below average for me, but it's still okay. But it's just some really terrible CGI here that it just really sucks.
Yeah. Well, obviously budget was an issue because I guess they filmed a lot of these movies in Australia because it was cheap. Yeah.
It's a nice feeling.
I mean, we've had, obviously this movie, but we've had some of the movies with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think The Condemned was filmed here. I think some of the John Cena movies, like, what was it? The Marine, I think it was. There's a bunch of other ones. Yeah. Anyways, so that's probably why the CGI is bad. They're just cutting costs or trying to make it as cheap as possible. And unfortunately, sometimes when you skimp on CGI, it doesn't always look great.
Oh my god. Speaking of a movie that has no CGI though, we moved to a TV movie from 1998 called Lost Souls, which stars John Savage, which is a somewhat big-ish name, I think. I mean, he's been in a lot of movies, so I'm assuming he's a bigger name. But it's a pretty, I guess, simple plot. A family moves into a sort of like a home in the country. They have an autistic daughter, and some things happen throughout the movie. It seems like the deceased spirits of these two mortal growers are trying to communicate to the family through the autistic daughter. And so the father's trying to figure out, hey, what's going on? Hey, who killed these girls? And there's a whole little mystery thing going on here. So it's a television movie, which we have to keep in mind. That's going to maybe impact your opinion on it. So it's not like high quality stuff. It's you can tell it's cheap, but I'll be honest. I think the movie has some charm to it. But I suspect this is probably going to be one of our biggest disagreements. So what were your thoughts on this one, Tracky?
Well, hey, I liked it more than the evil, but yeah, to me, it's kind of your typical TV movie. There's nothing a whole lot exciting going on. If you're really invested in the story, you may get something out of it, but it didn't really have any highlight moments for me. There's nothing that I look back on and think too positively about a certain scene. I mean, right now, the only scene I can think of is when that guy offers to watch their son. And all I'm thinking is, as soon as he did that, I'm thinking, you're gonna get raped.
Yeah, I mean, would you leave your kid with a random neighbor?
They kind of made it look like this, there's something off about this guy, so.
I mean, that's one thing I do think the movie does okay. Like a lot of the mystery type movies, they throw a lot of potential suspects out at you, and a lot of them seem like legitimate choices, such as this guy.
Yeah, it just. Yeah, like I said, there was no moments in the movie that really stood out to me. It kind of like just. It just. Like a lot of TV movies, they're just kind of in cruise control. Or the one thing, like you said to me, is like when we were talking about thriller movies at one point, and you said for you, thrillers are kind of like horror movies that just aren't good enough to be horror movie, or like they're not intense enough to be horror movies, or something like that. Maybe you want to relay what you said.
No, I mean that's pretty much what I said. I was just hoping people would
Yeah,
forget that.
and I think for the majority of TV movies, I have that sort of similar opinion that TV movies are just watered down real movies.
I mean, there have been some pretty good TV movies.
Yeah, I probably have more fond memories of TV movies back when I was younger, so movies that I would have watched when I was, 10, 11, 12, maybe. There's some movies out there, I can't really think off the top of my head, but I know there's some out there. But this is a first time watch for me, and it wasn't terrible, but it just, there's just nothing that really stood out for me.
No, I actually have seen this one once before, which is actually a theme for tonight. All of these movies I've actually only seen once before, so it's a nice trivia question about Jigsaw. But and the only thing I actually remembered about this movie was the conclusion. When we find out we solve the mystery behind the killer, and I enjoy the ending. I think the first time I saw this movie sort of caught me by surprise because, back then I was like a young guy who hadn't seen as many movies as I have now. So I think I think the mystery here is what really sort of draws me into it, and also something I just want to mention, the whole aspect of this family dealing with an autistic daughter. I thought that had some like feeling to it, you know whenever there's like a kid that has some developmental issues going on, it always takes just a bit more, extra work to make sure you're doing the right stuff. And I thought the parents, I thought they really showed like a love in this movie. It just sort of, it was sort of heartwarming almost, which I know some people might not want to see in like a horror movie, but again, hey, it's TV for you. So I sort of like that. It might not be, your go-to thing, but I think there's some feeling here, and I appreciate that.
the lead actor, the father in the movie, there's something about him that just didn't do it for me. Like, I don't know if I believed him as being an actual concerned father. I don't know. There's something about his acting and his voice that... Yeah.
It's funny. I was okay with that guy. It's the mother who bothered me. the um I have nothing against the woman who played the mother. I mean, I don't know her. She's just some German woman. But
Just some German woman.
but she didn't do anything for me, so it's like a 50-50 type thing. I think we can both agree though that the kid, the young boy, he was the best here.
No. Well,
okay. So
none of them were the best.
So I'm going to throw this movie a rating that might seem a lot higher than what most people would give this. And just to, I guess, reiterate beforehand, I really enjoy the mystery in this movie, even though it's like a sort of a watered down television movie type thing. I found it enjoyable. So I'm actually going to throw this movie an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. No. No.
You're just going to add it out my rating.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 4.
Hey, you're halfway there.
It's it's your typical TV movie that's if it had a few moments that really stood out to me more than someone banging on their door in the rain at night and
hey, that was spooky.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't really enjoy any of its high moments, so for me it didn't have any high moments, so
I will say the reason I watched it when I was younger, I bought some like cheap DVD, it has like 4 movies on it, and this happened to be one of the movies on it. The other movies are like, post 2000s horror movies, and they randomly threw on like a cheap 90s one to be the 4th movie, so that's how I ran into this.
Well, if it's on a cheap DVD, know it's quality.
There are sometimes pretty good movies on those DVDs. Case in point, Lost Souls.
Sometimes there's a diamond in the rough, but this isn't it.
You now have 5 seconds to comply. 4, 3, 2, 1. I am now authorizing your physical force.
Anyways, okay, next up. RoboCop from 1987. We all know what RoboCop's about, but for those who don't know, essentially the city of Detroit's riddled with crime, so this company develops a cyborg using parts from a terminally wounded cop, and essentially have this RoboCop who helps fight the crime in the city. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening, so... A lot of people love this movie. I really like it too. I used to watch this. Well, I still watch it, but I used to watch it a lot when I was younger. Even when I was probably around 8 years old, I have memories of renting this out on VHS, and I'm pretty sure it had those extended scenes in it where, like for instance, they have the botched Ed 209 thing at the beginning where the guy's just... Now, I'm not sure if you've actually seen or what version you've seen, but there's a scene where not only does he get shot up while he's standing, also while he's, fallen down on this model of this new city that they're building, he's still getting shot to shit everywhere, blood's flying, and it's it's a pretty graphic death. I'm pretty sure that all of that footage was in the original VHS here in Australia. Maybe I'm not remembering it correctly, but I know eventually, later on DVD at some point they added all this extra footage that wasn't on the earlier DVDs, I think. I can't remember. But anyways, it's a classic movie for me. I really enjoy it. I like a lot of the characters, even a lot of the bad guys in the movie are quite enjoyable in their own way. They all have their own personalities. It's got a lot of graphic violence. it's a good movie all round. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, this is probably one of the few times I'm going to agree that the non-horror movie is the best movie of the night. I've only seen this once before, but it's a really good movie. It's enjoyable. It's a nice sort of dystopic, futuristic type thing going on, where a corporation literally buys the police force. That's fantastic stuff. And of course, that comes up with so many problems. One thing I really like about this movie, the little news clips and the commercials, and it just gives sort of like you get to look into what the society is actually like, what you're seeing on the news, how they're getting this information, and it's just living in a society like that would just be so shitty. And of course, you couple that with fantastic special effects. Well, not all of them are fantastic, but they're decent, especially for the time, and pretty good performances. And it's a really fun movie throughout.
Yeah. Sucks to your first day on the job transferred and you get massacred.
Yeah, talk about that lag. That's
I mean, they establish his character pretty well. They show that he's a bit of a family man, and which makes it a little more sad than if it was just some random guy with no family. And
yeah, I'll say one thing I really like about this movie. So after the whole thing where the guy gets shot and sort of reconfigured into a cyborg type thing, I feel like a lot of movies would have him trying to reconnect with his wife and kid, but this movie, I mean, he investigates a bit once he starts remembering who he was, but the only time we see the wife and kid are pretty much through flashbacks, which I think had a bit more of an emotional impact, and I was definitely happy that they tried to pull those characters back in somehow.
I take it you haven't seen RoboCop 2.
Oh God, I have not.
Well, I actually like RoboCop 2 as much as I like the first movie. A lot of other people think it's, RoboCop 2 is still a good movie, but not as good as the first. But they do, only very briefly, they do have him, stalking his family, kind of.
Okay, I could see it. I mean, it makes some sense. I'm just happy they left that in the second movie.
Yeah. It's still only a very small part of the second movie. It's only like 2 scenes, maybe. But yeah, they do touch on that a little bit there. Since you haven't seen it, we'll have to do that one sometime in the near future, because I think it's still a really good movie.
And then we can go to RoboCop 3, for this a classic.
Yeah, well, RoboCop 3, I can leave that one. Anyways, back to RoboCop, the original movie. I think a part of the reason why you may actually enjoy this out of all the other movies we're discussing tonight, which are horror movies, is this probably still has some of the best death scenes out of all those movies.
Yeah, like you said, it's a very graphic violence here, and it's fantastic stuff.
A horror fan has to appreciate that one death where the guy just gets, I don't know, some sort of chemical spilt all over him, and he's just kind of like melting. And
yeah, that was pretty gruesome. I forgot that scene, so when I saw this scene again, it's sort of like it's a fantastic stuff. And actually, I have to imagine some people in the theaters when this came out may not have been too impressed with that.
Yeah. And I mean, the bad guys in the movie, in general, this gang of, what is it, 4 or 5 different guys? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 5 guys, but, the majority of them all have, like I said earlier, they all kind of, in their own way, have their own unique personalities, which all stand out. Obviously, the main one, Clarence, he stands out the most, and you'll really hate them, but at the same time, you kind of enjoy their personalities. So it's one of those rare movies where I wouldn't say you're rooting for the bad guys, but the bad guys make the movie just so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, and one thing I'll bring up, and like I said, since it's been so long since I've seen this, I forgot some of the finer details. So I actually sort of assumed that Miguel Furio's character was one of the main antagonists, which isn't necessarily the case. He actually doesn't make it much more past halfway through the movie. So that was a sort of a nice surprise when it turns out the other guy, is who seems like an okay guy at the beginning, just like has a few issues with the his robot program, but then we see that he's the main issues. I just thought it was a little nice sort of not necessarily a twist, but somewhat unexpected turn of events.
He just fucked with the wrong guy.
That's a great scene too.
I'm kind of wondering now, that guy, the now I can't remember his name. I know the actor's name, Ronnie Cox. And his name in the movie is Richard, but they call him Dick in some. I'm just wondering, did they do that? Call him Dick? I know Dick is kind of like the nickname for Richard, but did they call him Richard because his last name is Cox, so they can make Dick and Cox jokes? I don't know.
That is a question for the ages.
I know it's COX, but come on.
And actually, speaking, I also really like the ending of the movie. Where there's like a fourth directive, RoboCop must follow, and the way they get around that. It's simple, but it's so. I mean, who doesn't like the ending? Just fun stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. In fact, when this movie got remade, I can't remember how many years ago it was, 4 or 5 years ago. At that time, the internet had their own remake of the movie where, a bunch of either amateurish filmmakers or people who just, they just got a collection of different people do their own scenes from the movie. And they're all performed in all different kinds of ways. Some of them are performed just purely like someone's trying to make a movie. Then, like, there's one scene where you'd have to search it. It's called Our RoboCop Remake, and it's actually really funny. There's certain scenes, like the scene where Murphy gets shot to shit by the bad guys in the beginning. They recreate the scene with babies. With the actual audio from the movie, put in over it. They're holding these babies in clothing that one's dressed like a cop, the other one's dressed like Clarence the bad guy with glasses and stuff. It's fucking funny. And then there's one scene where, they spoof the scene where RoboCop shoots a guy in the dick. In this one, he shoots a guy in the dick, and then suddenly all these other rapists just come out of nowhere, and he's shooting like 100 different guys in the dick. And that's probably the one that gets talked about the most, but one that I really, really love is towards the end. You know how in this movie you've got the Ed 209 guarding the building?
Yes.
And, Murphy comes along, shoots it. In this one, same thing happens, but before he shoots it, Ed 209 quickly says, "No, I have a family." Then they do this flashback of Ed 209 with little Ed 209s. It's so hilarious. You gotta watch it. I'm sure it's on YouTube. I mean, obviously there's some scenes that kind of fall flat or I didn't find amusing, but it's just so wacky and so much more fun than watching the RoboCop remake.
Yeah, no, I've not seen the remake, but I have to imagine it feels somewhat soulless.
Yeah, to be honest, it wasn't bad. It just feels like a mainstream movie that doesn't have any of the things that really made the original one special. It just felt like a mainstream movie. Yeah, so RoboCop, it's a really great movie. There's a lot of fun to be had here. A lot of great characters. A lot of standout deaths in the movie. It's quite graphic. There's a lot to like about the movie. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10, and I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, so it's a pretty fun action movie. With some sci-fi thrown in. It's just a all-around enjoyable movie. Fantastic performances, fantastic effects. I have a hard time, imagining the type of individual who doesn't get anything out of this. It's a longer movie, but it keeps you engaged throughout. It's just a good thing. It's fantastic. So I'm throwing this one also a 9 out of 10.
That's right. You like that RoboCop, don't you?
Some good stuff.
Yeah.
How's life?
I don't know.
Seen any other movies recently that might warrant a mention?
Well, I'm assuming you've forgotten, but we still have one more movie to discuss.
Oh God, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. Yes. Last we have I'm sorry. RoboCop just seemed like the perfect movie to end it on. Um, so lastly, we have 1985. The Staff. It's an interesting movie. Basically, this mysterious substance from the earth is found by some miners, and they start marketing it. It apparently tastes good. They market it as like a dessert type treat. And it has some dangerous properties. It seems to be alive, and this one corporate espionage guy gets hired by an ice cream company to sort of look into this. Like, hey, this stuff is stealing, money from us. So let's figure out where this came from. And so it just follows this somewhat ridiculous espionage guy as he tries to discover the identity and what's behind the stuff. I'll be honest, I find the movie, it's sometimes a bit over the top, especially toward the end with God, what's the guy's name? Paul Sorvino's character, who plays sort of like this like disgraced right wing military guy. He's a bit much, but I enjoy pretty much most of the rest of the movie. So some of the scenes, some of them are, like I said, they're a bit much, but I like the characters here. The plot sort of all over the place. They like go from Illinois to Georgia just to figure out hey, where's the stuff coming from? And there's like little mystery involved. So I know I personally enjoy the movie, but I can imagine that some people may not have gotten as much out of it as myself. What did you think, Chucky?
I've seen this movie once before, and the first time that I watched it, I was kind of like, it's, didn't really do anything for me. Wasn't necessarily bad, just didn't do anything. And so when I watched it again, I watched it last night, I got like 20 seconds in, and immediately I had to pause and rewind what I had just watched, because it's so ridiculous. It starts off with this guy who finds this like pulsating white liquid, and not only does he stick his hand in it, he has no reservations about tasting it. I mean, wouldn't you think this pulsating liquid be somewhat dangerous? I mean, this guy just goes in like it's fucking ice cream. I was just like, who does that? Who in their right mind would do that? So it got off to such a ridiculous start. The movie's okay. It's got a lot of similarities to the Blob, obviously. I know this was made a little bit before the Blob remake, but you can draw a lot of similarities in a lot of different ways. Not just from the liquid type stuff itself, but also, they bring in kind of like the whole military science type aspect to it. I don't know, but there's a few decent gruesome moments in it, but overall, I didn't really enjoy the characters or anything. There's some very noticeable green screens in the movie as well, which just, sometimes that's okay, and they don't go overboard with it here, but I just caught it in a number of different scenes, and it just stood out too much for me. If you grew up watching this movie, I can see why you'd have some attachment to it, or if you just love everything from the 80s, you're probably going to have a decent time with it, but yeah, it's just not consistently good for me.
Have you seen many other Larry Cohen movies out of interest?
I have. Now, that's one thing I meant to look up before, and I forgot to do it because I am familiar. Yeah, off the top of my head, he wrote the Maniac Cop movies, so obviously I like the Maniac Cop movies. Off the top of my head, I knew he did the It's Alive movies, or at least one or two of them. Yeah, he's okay. I have no problems with anything he's really done, but I wouldn't say outside of the Maniac Cop series there's a whole lot that I love.
Yeah, I think this movie is somewhat interesting because it's obviously somewhat a satirical type movie, but it's sort of going after consumerism. Um, much like actually RoboCop, I like the little commercials we see in this movie. You know, like can't get enough of the stuff. It's just I don't know, it sort of cracked me up every time one of those commercials came on because in a society when people are just blindly buying the new fad thing, you know, like there's like a sort of like a ice cream stand only it's just stuff and it's just ridiculous, but and a consumeristic society like this, it makes sense. So I enjoyed it for that aspect, sort of going after that type of thing, and then of course bringing in the FDA. How did this get approved? And oh hey, the documents and files have gone missing. That's interesting. So I mean, if you look past some like the overly ridiculous, silly stuff, I think the movie has a little more to offer. But even so, I think the movie as a whole, I think it's pretty good. I think the ending's a bit iffy, mainly because I don't really like the military character. I don't really think that went anywhere, and the idea that this right-wing radio host can somehow change the minds of all these people who are eating this tafaradi just strikes me as like unbelievable. And I like how that's one of my main complaints about the movie. But otherwise I think it's decently enjoyable. And the special effects, green screens aside, I sort of did like that one scene in the hotel in which, much like actually Nightmare on Elm Street, it's the blob type thing is crawling up the wall, consuming somebody, and I thought it was pretty decent. Plus, I guess I also have to say, again, he's over the top. I actually really like the main character here. His ridiculous southern accent just consistently cracked me up. You know why they call me Mo?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wish we had seen more of Chocolate Chip Charlie. He was one of the OPs in this movie.
Yeah. Well, he had one of the few gruesome deaths or gruesome moments in the movie that I was referring to earlier. So, from a cheesy 80s horror movie aspect, those few scenes can do something for you, but they're kind of still few and far between for me to really make the movie as a whole all that enjoyable.
Yeah, and I'll say this, I actually liked this movie more the first time I saw it than I did this time. No, I still think it's a good movie, don't get me wrong, but I did feel like a slight decrease in enjoyment. So I sort of wonder, like let's say 3 or 4 years down the line, if I watch this again, if I'm going to enjoy it even as much as I did just a few days ago. So I'm going to throw this movie a 7.5 out of 10, and I've had to think about this for a bit, and I'm probably going to round that down to a 7 out of 10. But I do think the movie's just a bit above average. It's just not. It's not an amazing movie, but I do think the movie has a decent amount to offer. I mean, I had a fun time. I really like the commercials here, the little jingle about the stuff, that scene where the kid goes wild in the grocery store. That's again, this is so ridiculous, but it just cracked me up. Like they should have stopped that guy, that kid, like about 3 minutes early.
I also think that scene happened way too early in the movie. Like, he within a few minutes of the movie starting, he's convinced there's something wrong with this, and then he goes in with basically with the intention of just creating chaos in the supermarket. You think he would have done that after a few more scenes with his family and a few more disagreements and.
Actually, and one thing I also had to bring up before you go ahead with your rating, I did like and it didn't really focus on it that much because past a certain point it doesn't really matter to the story. But when the little kid's dealing with his family, it's sort of like a almost an invasion of the body snatchers type situation, because here's his family that you know and love, and all of a sudden they're acting like entirely different people. You open the refrigerator and all the food's thrown out, it's just the stuff. I mean, I know it's a silly movie, but there's a little, sort of dark, ominous undertones to those scenes.
Mm. I was tossing up between a 5 and a 6. I guess I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and give it a 6. But yeah, it's at least it's got some cheesy 80s gruesome type deaths to to really make it stand out, at least in certain moments of the movie.
It also has a really cool poster, so
Yeah.
well, I'll just say goodbye to the people, and I hope that you enjoy movies.